Hello, everyone. My name is Emily, and I'm an Assistant Youth and Teen Services Librarian here at Fayetteville Public Library. And today I am here to bring you the fourth episode of the Reading Buddy Book Club for June. We are reading Malamander by Thomas Taylor. Now, where we left off, we were just learning more about the disappearance of Violet's parents. We've got quite a long way to go today, but before we start, make sure that you grab your reading buddy and also that you're working on those crafts and coloring pages, or feel free to follow along as I read. Go ahead and get cozy and let's dive in. Chapter 19, Close Encounters. I bet Sebastian Eels knows, says Violet as the door of the Eerie book dispensary closes behind us. It's properly dark now and getting late, but the mist seems to be lifting, and the moon cuts through the haze above us. Our footsteps crackle in the frost as we pass the dolphin fountain and leave the square. I bet he knows exactly what happened to my mom and dad. You could be right, I reply. But what can we do about it? We can't confront him without any evidence. How much do you trust Jenny? Violet asks, and I look at her in surprise. I've never thought about it, but I don't see why she'd lie to us. Why do you ask? I don't know, says Violet. It's just that I wanted to ask her a question, but suddenly thought I should keep it back. What question? About the Malamander egg, says Violet. It seems to me, I say, as we start down the narrow steps towards the hotel, that if you want to know more about that part of the legend, you should read the rest of that book of yours. When we're safely back in my cellar and not freezing our cockles off out here, you can have another good go at it, Vi, and maybe find some answers for yourself. Yeah, maybe, says Violet. Above us, the last of the sea mist melts from the sky, and we stop and gaze in wonder at the inky blackness of space, sparkling with stars. What's that? Asks Violet. The inky blackness of space, I say, sparkling with stars. No, not that. That! I look where she is pointing. Just above the rooftops, one star burns brighter than the rest, fierce and red. As we watch, the light dims till it's almost out before flaring bright and red again. That's no star, says Violet. I'm about to say something when a sound cuts through the night air. It's a screeching, roaring wail, and when it dies down, I find I'm clinging onto Violet, and she's clinging onto me. Okay, and what's that? Violet says. Close, I reply. That's what it is. Too close. As our eyes adjust to the moonlight, we see that the strange, pulsating red star that isn't a star isn't in the sky at all, but in a window. The window of an old tower above the battlements. That's the museum, I say. Dr. Thalassie's museum? Just then, the terrible, shrieking wail comes again, echoing in the narrow street, and the red light winks out altogether. For a moment, as we watch, a dark and spiny shape seems to scuttle up the wall of the tower, but when I blink to make sure I'm not seeing things, it disappears. We should go, I say, trying not to squeak. We certainly should, says Violet, for we missed something important, and hurries off towards the museum. Wait, I grab her coat. I didn't mean that way, I meant back to the hotel. But the adventure is that way, Violet pulls herself free, not back at the hotel. But back in the hotel, there aren't any strange lights or terrible nightmare sounds, I squawk, flapping my arms. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but that doesn't mean cats shouldn't be curious. Ha, I cry. That's easy for you to say. Except, Violet replies, blinking. Except I didn't say that. He did. I look to where she's nodding. Erwin is sitting on a nearby window ledge, giving us both a significant look. Seriously? I say to him. But the cat just purrs and licks his paw like any other cat in the world, and by the time I turn back to Violet, she's already running off into the dark, toward the museum. So there's nothing left for me to do but run after her. I catch up to her as she's heading down another flight of stairs and out into a dimly lit street. From here, I can see Mrs. Fossil's Flutz Emporia. There's a light on somewhere inside, and I wonder how she's doing, but I can't stop to knock now. Violet is off again. It's only when we come out onto the battlements at the fortified western end of town that Violet finally comes to a halt. She crouches in the shadow and nods across the expanse of cobbles onto a crenellated medieval building that hulks on the other side. "Is this it?" she whispers. "Yes, the museum is in the old castle," I whisper back. "Well, the doctor's office takes up some of the ground floor part, but all that up there is the museum, including the tower." Violet looks up at the tall Gothic windows. They look back at us, black and vacant. Silence is over everything, and I begin to wonder if we really saw or heard anything strange at all. Unsurprisingly, at this late hour, the tall arched door of the museum is firmly shut. "Where does that go?" says Violet. She's pointing at the flight of ancient steps that wind around the back of the building. "Sideway in," I reply, "but..." Violet darts out into the moonlight and crosses to the castle. Then she trots up the steps and vanishes from view. "What are you doing?" I say in my loudest whisper. "Violet!" I find her standing on the top step, beside a gnarly wooden door. Of course, she's testing the handle. "Seriously, Vi, it won't open. We should go." Violet releases the door handle with a sigh. "After all that, we've missed it," she says, "whatever it was." From the steps, we can see over the highest part of the town's ramparts, down to the shore far below. The sea mist, which has by now entirely seeped out of the town, is collecting on the beach below. With the moonlight pouring down, it looks like a rolling ocean of silvery vapor, making it impossible to see what may or may not be on the sand below. "Do you have a flashlight?" says Violet. "I just want to peek through the window." When she sees the expression on my face, she adds, "Then we'll go, Herbie, I promise." I rummage in the enormous pocket of my coat and pull out a small flashlight. I join Violet at a window beside the door, place the business end of the flashlight right against the glass to avoid reflection, and click it on. Inside the museum, dark shapes and twisted shadows are thrown into relief by the sudden light. "Happy now?" I whisper. Violet squints in, shielding her eyes. "I can't see much." "Which is why we should come back tomorrow when the museum is actually open," I say, and shut off the light. But Violet suddenly gasps, and she grabs the flashlight in my hand. It's an unexpected movement, and the flashlight falls and hits the hard flagstone with a crack. "What are you doing?" I say, but Violet ducks down and pulls me after her. "There's something in there," she hisses in my ear. "It's a museum," I say. "Of course there's something in there. Something moving." Violet puts her finger to her lips. Slowly, we both rise up and peer into the window. Nothing. Just dark and blackness and nothing. But then, two pale orbs, side by side, blink at us with reflected moonlight. I say that bad word again. I can't help it. If those are eyes, they are the size of grapefruits. Then something hits the glass, a flat, slippery something that slaps the window right in front of us with such force that it shatters. We fall back, shards of glass and window frame raining down all around. I feel points of pain on my hands and face as the pieces cut in. Then something huge is there, slipping through the shattered window, a fast-moving shadow that blots out the moonlight above. It jumps over our heads, hitting the rampart wall with a clatter. It begins to throw itself over the edge. Except it can't. Violet is jerked to her feet by some tremendous force. I see that she is going hands first, and I realize why. She's holding on to something. Is it a tentacle, or a tail, or just a piece of hose? In the gloom, there is no way I can tell. All I can see is that if Violet doesn't let go, she'll be pulled over the ramparts too, down onto the tooth-like steeples of maw rocks far below. So I grab her by the boot and am dragged hard against the wall. Let go, I want to shout, but I can't, not with the air being crushed out of my lungs. I struggle up and seize her coat with my other hand and pull her back as hard as I can. From here, I can look down the wall. Violet is now halfway over the rampart, her hair dangling crazily over her face, her fists still tightly balled as she clings to whatever it is. The two orbs of light flash again. There's a shrieking howl, and something swipes across my field of vision. Is it a hand? Is it a claw? Or a flipper? Violet shrieks out in pain and finally lets go, and we both fall back onto the steps. The dark shape of what could be a tail whips away, and I jump up to the wall, desperate to get a good look at whatever it was attached to. I expect to hear a thud, and maybe a crunch of breaking bone, as the tail owner falls and hits the rocks, but instead, there's just a faint flippery sound, then nothing. A shadow flits between two spurs of rock, vanishing into a swirl of mist. There's a hint of movement in the fog further down the beach. And then even that is gone. Soon, all we can hear is the faint washing of the tide as the invisible sea creeps slowly back up the land. Chapter 20, Dr. Thalassie. When I found out who you were, Violet Parma, I thought your arrival might mean trouble for this town, but I never thought vandalism would be a problem. Why on earth are you breaking windows in my museum? We're sitting in Dr. Thalassie's study, behind tall glass windows that look out over the main hall of the museum. From here, the exhibits beyond are nothing but strange skeleton shapes. The only light comes from a paraffin lamp that hisses on the desk. The doctor had this with him when he found us crouching in shock on the ramparts. The folded umbrella he brandished as a weapon is on his desk, too, like a polite threat. It wasn't me, protests Violet. I didn't break anything. It was... I'm listening, says the doctor, one thick black eyebrow raised at us. Violet looks at me, and I shrug back. After all, what did we see? I clear my throat and hope that the band-aids on my face don't look too ridiculous. As official lost and founder at the Grand Nautilus Hotel, I assure you that neither I nor my associate here would break your windows for fun, Dr. Thalassie. You can drop the posh voice, Herbie, interrupts the doc, lowering both eyebrows into a single monster caterpillar of hair. It won't work on me. I deflate. But it wasn't us, says Vi. It really wasn't. Dr. Thalassie looks at us one last time, then he nods. He lifts the umbrella off the desk and drops it into a brass stand nearby. I know it wasn't, he says after a moment. The glass is all on the outside. Whoever broke that window was inside the museum already. Ow, it's starting to hurt, says Violet, clutching her cheek. The doctor has already given her a wad of cotton, soaked in disinfectant, to hold against it. The cotton wad is pink with blood. Let me see, says the doctor. He gets to his feet and allows his specs to drop down onto his nose as he peers at the wound. This wasn't done by glass, he says. It looks for all the world like something scratched you, something big. Violet and I exchange glances again, but there doesn't seem to be any point to beating around this particular supernatural bush. Dr. Thalassie, says Violet, do you believe in the Malamander? The doctor sits back, making his chair creak, and places his fingertips together in a steeple. Since he's also wearing a swirly dressing gown, he reminds me for a moment of Sherlock Holmes. Interesting question, he says. A legendary aquatic creature, entirely unknown to science, that is rumored to haunt these shores and which is occasionally sighted by the townsfolk as they roll home from the pub at midnight. And for which there isn't a shred of evidence, I might add. Do you think this is something I should believe in? When you say it like that, it sounds silly, says Violet. But what about Mrs. Fossil's arm? You said yourself she'd been bitten. The curve of that bite was right across her forearm and hand. Surely that was done by something big, too. Isn't that evidence? The doctor narrows his eyes. Let's say for a moment that I do believe. Or let's say, at least, that I believe it is possible, which is not quite the same thing. Why would such a creature be inside my museum, behind locked doors, at night? It might, says Violet, meeting his gaze, if it were looking for something. The doctor's eyebrow slowly creeps up again. Violet pulls out her book and lays it on the desk in front of her. From where I sit, I can see Malamander written across the sea green cover in faded bronze letters. When I was given this book by the mermonkey, I thought it was just a story, just a local legend. But since then, I've seen things, twice now, that I can't explain. And I found things out too. Like the fact that my dad believes the creature described in this book is real. And if it is real, then what about other things in the book? What other things? Says the dog. I think you know. Dr. Thalassie stares at Violet. Then he puts one hand into his dressing gown pocket and pulls something out. He places it gently on the desk between us. It's roughly the size and shape of a very large egg, ruby red in color and glowing faintly in the light of the lamp. The Malamander egg, says Violet in a whisper. Or, says the doctor, a piece of harmless red sea glass, found by Mrs. Fossil, which just happens to be egg-shaped, which is a great deal more likely, wouldn't you agree? But if it's just that, I say, why do you want it? The doc smiles. He picks up the paraffin lamp and moves it across his desk. The egg-shaped glass lump, or whatever it is, glows brighter and fiercer as the lamp approaches, then fainter again as it moves away, like a winking red star. You were trying to lure it here, Violet cries, up in your tower, shining that red light. You were trying to lure the Malamander. If, says the doctor, raising a finger, and it's still a big if, the Malamander is real, then it bit Mrs. Fossil for a reason. Maybe it mistook this piece of red glass for something else, if only for a moment. That is a hypothesis that can only be tested by experiment. But it's a monster. By experiment, the doc insists, to gather evidence. An experiment that just slashed off half of Vi's face, I blurt out. Is that evidence enough for you? Okay, the half a face thing is a teensy bit of an exaggeration, but the doc sighs and has the decency to look sheepish anyway. His eyebrows seem to flock from one side of his forehead to the other. Don't forget that you're the intruders here, Herbie, he says eventually, slipping the lump of sea glass back into his pocket. It was not my intention to cause anyone harm. Awkward silence. Then the doc changes the subject by reaching out and picking up Violet's book. Malamander, by Captain K, he says. One of the more interesting tales associated with the legend. Jenny told me you were dispensed this. I have a copy myself, of course, but mine doesn't have seaweed stains on it. Have you finished reading it yet? Violet says nothing, so I pipe up. I haven't read any of it, Doc, though I'm beginning to think I should. Everyone who lives in Eerie-on-Sea should read this book, Herbie, says Dr. Thalassie, waggling it at me. I'll add it to my to-do list. In the meantime, could you give me the nutshell version, please, Doc? I don't mind spoilers. Dr. Thalassie leans back in his chair. The paraffin lamp hisses softly on his desk, making the shadows dance in the room. Very well, he says. Chapter 21, Leviathan. Captain K was the commander of the warship Leviathan during the later years of Queen Victoria's reign, says Dr. Thalassie. He was patrolling the far north when he discovered a floating island of rock and ice that wasn't on any chart. Through his telescope, he spied a vast, glittering cavern in the island. Under the glow of the aurora borealis, Captain K ordered a boat to be lowered into the sea and had himself rowed over through the wind and snow to explore. As the boat entered the cavern, there came a terrible sound, a squeaking, wailing roar, that filled the seamen with dread. They wanted to turn back. "Since when have sailors been scared of the wind?" said Captain K, and he ordered them to row on. The cavern led to the heart of the island. There they found a great sinking mound of seaweed, bones, and shipwreck salvage. At the top of the mound was an eerie red glow. The men again asked to turn back, but again the captain called them cowards. He stepped out onto the seaweed mound himself and began to climb. "Brave, I say, but I think he should have listened to his men." Dr. Thalassie shrugs. "Maybe so. Anyway, when he reached the top of the mound, he found that the mound was actually a gigantic nest. For resting in a little dip on the summit, Captain K found a large red crystal egg glowing with its own internal light. "How can it be an egg if it's made of crystal?" I say. "Do you want me to tell the story," says the doc, "or answer all your questions?" I zip my mouth shut with an okey-doke grin. Captain K had never seen anything like this strange egg, yet it seemed oddly familiar, like something from a story, half forgotten. He picked up the egg and gasped at the warmth of it. It seemed to vibrate with creative promise, as if all it was waiting for was something to realize its magical potential. Or someone. In the captain's wandering mind, 1,000 voices seemed to whisper as one, "I can make your dreams come true." Captain K shook his head. He didn't have time for magical voices and fairy tale nonsense. On the one hand, a glowing red crystal the size of an ostrich egg? Why, that would certainly make a fine trophy for his mantelpiece back home. So he tucked the pretty thing in the crook of his arm. He hardly heard the terrible shrieking roar that sounded again as he slid back down to the boat and ordered his men to row for the ship. It was only later, as dawn broke and Leviathan was steaming southward, away from the strange floating island, that the captain remembered the legend of the Malamander. He had grown up in the town of Eerie, you see, and had spent many a sleepless childhood night trying not to think about the terrible monster in the old tales. "Didn't that lay a glowing red egg too?" he muttered to himself, "in the stories? And wasn't there anything about the egg having the power to grant wishes?" But as I've already said, Captain K didn't believe in magic and nonsense. Nevertheless, he ordered the ship's speed to be increased, just in case. It was that night that the monster attacked. The men were prepared. Many lives were lost defending Leviathan against the creature, which bristled with fins and quivering spines and terrified all who saw it. Bullets sparked off its scales, leaving scarcely a mark, and its claws could rend iron. By dawn, the men had driven it off, but the sun rose over a ship in a terrible state. The next night, the men were better prepared and armed to the teeth. They fought bravely and in good formation, and again the creature was driven off, but again the cost was cripplingly high. As the sun rose on the aftermath, the mighty battleship was listing in the water, and the loss of men was appalling. "It comes for its egg," the surviving sailors cried at the captain. "For the love of grog, give it back its egg." Captain K, alone in his cabin, had come to the same conclusion. He brought the egg out of its hiding place and wondered if he should throw it in the sea. After all, good men were dying, so that he could keep it. But the egg dazzled him with its beauty and thrilled him with its strange promise. There was no way he could give up such a wondrous thing. "So what if the Malamander is real after all?" says the captain, gazing into the magical light of the creature's egg. "It's still just a dumb animal, while I'm a man and commander of the most powerful vessel in the fleet." The thousand-fold voice whispered in his mind again, "I can make your dreams come true. I can grant your heart's desire." "My wish right now is to survive this," says the captain. almost without thinking. I don't want to be killed like a rat in a barrel by this fiendish creature. Then he added, because he suddenly realized it was his heart's desire, I want to live forever. Then you shall, said a voice, for as long as you can keep the egg, but if you lose it, your wish shall become your curse. Fight harder, the captain roared to his men. Prepare yourselves. Defend the ship at all costs. The third night brought the strongest attack yet. The captain and the remains of his crew barricaded themselves on the bridge and fought to hold the Malamander back. The captain himself received many injuries, but a strange thing happened. A sea mist, which came out of nowhere, surrounded Captain K, and his wounds closed up as soon as they opened, and his injuries healed. The exhaustion of battle left him, and he knew that the egg, tucked safely in the pocket of his greatcoat, was indeed granting him his wish. He knew that he would survive the fight, that he would live forever. But that's more than could be said for his crew. By the time the dawn came and the monsters had once again withdrawn, barely a handful remained. The Leviathan, which was billowing smoke and listing even further into the water, was directed at war speed towards Eerie on Sea, its engines hot and rumbling as the men burned everything in sight to create steam. The Malamander was an eerie legend, the captain reasoned, and maybe, just maybe, if they could lead it home, the monster would leave them alone. Dr. Thalassie paused and looked thoughtfully at the paraffin lamp. And, says Violet, after a moment, pulling her coat closer, don't stop now. Did it leave them alone? The doctor lowers his brow. They approached the town the following day, at dusk, steaming at a reckless rate. Far from leaving them alone, the monster attacked the moment the sun went down. With the last of his men stationed in the engine room, ordered to keep course for Eerie on Sea, Captain K went out onto the deck to face the Malamander alone. That's bonkers, I say. Indeed, says the doctor. Very bonkers. But the captain was drunk with power. He had the magical egg, after all, and he knew he would live forever as long as he possessed it. He felt invincible. And according to legend, the Malamander, though tough as steel, was not invincible. It had one weakness. It could be killed. At least, that's what the stories said. Captain K thought that with magic on his side, he would find the weakness and finish the beast off for good. Only that's not what happened, says Violet. Dr. Thalassie shakes his head. Whether it was some treachery in the magic or some miscalculation on the part of the captain, this was to be his last stand. As he faced up to the monster on the heaving deck, wreathed in the strange sea mist, clutching the egg like a weapon, the creature darted forward and delivered a bite. A good, hard bite which injected stinging venom. The bite hurt, but the real terror wasn't in the pain. It was in the cold numbness that froze the captain's limbs. He lost ability to move down one side of his body, and he fell. In horror, Captain K could only watch as the Malamander bent over him and with a single snap of his jaws tore his right hand, the hand that held the Malamander egg, clean off and swallowed it whole. So he lost, I say, after a pause to let the gory details sink in. The egg. But doesn't that mean the wish would become a curse? I'm glad you were paying attention, Herbie, said the doc with a nod. The Malamander, having devoured its magical egg once again, slipped into the sea with a final roar and was gone. The ship ran aground, of course, and the last of the crew abandoned the wreck. As for the captain, with the magic gone, all the wounds he had received during the battle returned. He was found on the deck by some brave souls from Eerie, a ruin of a man, ranting and raving, and waving the stump where his hand used to be, vowing revenge against the Malamander. In the days that followed, he had somehow grafted on his arm, in place of a lost hand, something he could use as a weapon, and they say he spent the rest of his days hunting for the monster that had destroyed him. I looked at Vi, and she looked at me. The something, I say, in a slightly wobbly voice. The something he had grafted on instead of a hand. I don't suppose the book says anything about what that something might be. It does, as it happens, says Dr. Thalassie. It was a boat hook. We're getting somewhere. Chapter 22, The Eerie Museum. When was this book written? Asks Vi, after a shocked pause. Malamander, says Dr. Thalassie. Oh, well over a century ago. I'd have to look it up. Violet turns to me. It must be a coincidence, surely. A coincidence? Asks the doctor. What is a coincidence? What happened to Captain K? Violet ignores the question by asking one of her own. In the end. No one knows for sure, says the doctor. Some say that even now we can sometimes be seen, wandering at night near the wreck, searching for the monster and his revenge. But that can't be true. He must be long dead. Are there any pictures of Captain K? I ask without squeaking. Any old photos? This is a museum, says Dr. Thalassie. Of course there are old photos. We're in the main exhibition space of the Eerie Museum, in the softly fizzing glow of the paraffin lantern. Above us, the skeleton of a whale hangs suspended, and in the cabinets all around, stuffed and desiccated sea creatures peer out at us through glass eyes. Over here, says the doctor, leading us to the far wall. This display concerns the wrecking of the Leviathan. And there, among the nautical charts and brass instruments of navigation, we see what, by now, we are both dreading, a faded sepia photo of a man in a captain's uniform, standing on the deck of an immense iron warship. This man is less grotesque, and with a neater, trimmer beard, but there's no mistaking him. Boat hook man, Violet whispers. He doesn't have a boat hook for a hand in this picture, I say. He wouldn't. The doctor holds the lamp even closer so we can read the caption. This was taken 5 years before all that happened. He was 60 years old at the time. But that would make him, I say, working it out roughly in my head. Going on 200 years old? He can't be. Violet looks as shocked as I feel. Dr. Thalassie watches us with an inscrutable expression. It almost sounds, he says after a moment, as if you think you've met Captain K, even though that would be completely impossible. Yeah, I say, completely impossible. Why is it so cold in here? Violet pulls her coat tightly around herself. A window was broken, remember, says the doctor. I had better cover it for the rest of the night, or I could have more intruders. You two can help me, then I'll walk you home. How did it get in, I say? The intruder, I mean. All the other windows seem intact. They are, says the doctor, but can you smell something unusual, Herbie Lemon? Something that will give you a clue? I sniff. The place smells of beeswax polish and ancient wood and preserving fluids and old stone, and something else. Soot? Says Vi, almost sniffing. Together we turn to the huge medieval fireplace, deep enough to stand in, that reaches up one of the walls. It doesn't look as if a fire has been lit in here for years, says Violet, as we step inside and look up. Far above, a rectangle of cold night sky is visible, a single shimmering star winking in the center. Not for centuries, agrees Dr. Thalassie, and yet, look down. We do so. There are newly fallen flakes of blackened soot and brick on the hearthstones, which crunch underfoot. It came down the chimney, I say, looking back up again. Someone did at least, says the doc. Wait, what's that? Asks Vi, pointing up. The doctor lifts the lantern and something gleams. stuck between two stones. The doctor reaches up and plucks it out. He holds it to the lantern, and we gather around the object in his fingertips. It's a scale, rigid and sharp and iridescent with purples and greens, and big. Evidence? Says Violet, glancing at the doctor. Says the doctor, slipping the scale inside his waistcoat pocket. Fixing a piece of board over that broken window takes less time than I expected. With the doctor up the ladder and me passing nails, Violet has nothing to do but hold the doc's dressing gown while she waits for us to finish. Dr. Thalassie insists on walking us back to the hotel, but I'm a bit nervous. I'm still keeping Violet a secret, remember? And I managed to persuade him to leave us at the corner of Spindrift Alley, a little way from the hotel entrance. We watch as he strolls back up to his museum, swinging his umbrella. He lifts his Astrakhan hat to say goodbye, and then he's gone. Back in the hotel, I'm disappointed to see that Ambergris is still on duty at reception, which means that she at least knows how late I got back. She gives me a wink, which means she probably won't tell old Mollusk. But I can't be sure. There's a pile of stuff for me to sort through on my cubbyhole desk. I grab it and vanish down to my cellar, where, of course, the wood burner is now midnight cold. I open the window, and Violet hops down. We need to decide what we're going to do next, says Violet, but I hold up my hand. Oh no, we need to sleep. I chuck my cap into the corner and flop down in my chair. I've had more than enough of today, thanks. Let's see how it all looks tomorrow. Okay then, says Violet, more meekly than I was expecting. Sleep well, Herbie, and maybe barricade the window just in case. Why on earth should I do that? I reply, frowning, because that's a funny thing to say. Well, if what we learned today about the Malamander and its egg is true, Violet smiles strangely, heading toward her bed of coats. We might get a visitor in the night. Wait, I say, sitting up. What have you done? Me? Yes, you. Why do you look so pleased with yourself? I'm just saying that we should be careful, that's all, she says. And that's when I notice that she's fiddling with something in her coat pocket. An image of Violet holding the doc's dressing gown while we fix the window flashes into my head, and I gasp. You didn't. I did, Violet grins, and she pulls out her hand. The egg-shaped stone that Mrs. Fossil found on the beach, and which the doctor placed on his desk as he told us the fantastic, tragical story of Captain K, gleams brilliant ruby red in her palm. Chapter 23, Mr. Mollusk. It's still stealing, I say to Violet the next morning as I struggle to get my teeth through my very stale breakfast. Whatever else you want to call it. Is it really stealing, though? Says Vi, turning the egg-shaped stone in her hand. 2 days ago, it was just lying on the beach with no owner at all. A lot has happened in those 2 days, Vi. I know, but Herbie, Violet says, holding her prize up to the light. What if this is a real Malamander egg? It's so small, I say with a snort. Besides, the Malamander chased Captain K across the Atlantic to get its egg back and wrecked a battleship doing it. Do you really think it would just leave its egg lying around on a beach, or allow Dr. Thalassie to wander around with it in his dressing gown pocket? No, but, Vi, I say, giving her one of my most discouraging looks. What you have there is just a lump of sea glass, a stolen lump at that. I'm not really sure why you took it. Vi glares back at me, then slips the red stone back into her pocket. Because, she says, whether it's real or not, Dr. Thalassie was using it last night to attract the Malamander, and I don't think that's something anyone should be doing, do you? Maybe not, but I'm expecting the doctor to come hammering on my cubbyhole at any moment now, demanding it back. Then we'll just say that we found it. Violet gives me a beaming smile. And you can return it to him, Herbie. That's your job, after all. Through the cellar window, I see that it's snowing, properly snowing this time, with great flat flakes that fall like marshmallows. I've got my burner fired up, and it's nice not to have to go out into the cold just yet, but to sit instead in the warm glow and chat with Violet about mysteries and magic, and for the first time in a long time, not feel quite so alone. Anyway, I haven't exactly had any of my wishes come true, says Violet, looking sadly at her rock-hard croissant. Have you? I glance at her again, but decide to say nothing. Once breakfast is finished, I straighten my uniform and pop my Lost and Founder's cap on, managing not to ping the elastic this time. I need to work by. Lost things were handed in yesterday, and I've got to look busy in front of old Mollusk, or I'll be on the chopping block. You should stay down here where it's safe and give the whole strange business a good thinking over. I'll be back around lunchtime and we can talk then. But when I get to my cubbyhole, I find that old Mollusk is already there. He leers in over my desk, twitching his horrible mustache. To whom were you talking, Lemon? I say the bad word again, only inside my head this time. Just to myself, sir, I say. Sometimes it's the only way I can get an intelligent conversation around here. The hotel manager glares at me, his mouth pursed like a cat's bum. Then he jerks open a tape measure and lays it across the opening of my Lost and Foundry. Puh, too small, he mutters. I had plans to fit a toothbrush dispenser in there. But it looks as though I'll have to get it boarded up after all. With you and the rest of the rubbish still inside. Have you lost something, sir? I say. Your marbles, perhaps? I am about to lose something, yes. Mr. Mollusk grins and snaps the tape measure shut. For good. You're out, Herbert Lemon. Fired. And with that, he drops a letter onto the desk in front of me and stalks off, chuckling to himself. I look at the letter. He can't fire me. Only Lady Kraken can do that. And as Lady Kraken says herself, there has always been a Lost and Founder at the Grand Nautilus Hotel. But I can see Lady K's spider writing on the envelope. I go to tear it open and find it's been peeled open already. Mr. Mollusk has read it. I pull the note out and read it myself. Herbert Lemon, I know what you did last night. I am extremely disappointed in you. Come to my room immediately. Lady Kraken. I reach the door to the Jules Verne suite. Along the corridor behind me, I can feel the painted eyes of the Kraken family glaring down from their picture frames. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have forgotten the camera Luna? I reach out and pull the cord and hear the distant ding of the bell. The come in light flashes on immediately, and the door swings open. Lady Kraken's enormous, curtain-shrouded sitting room is lit with cold light from an open French window. In the window, her back to me, Lady Kraken herself sits in her bronze and wicker wheelchair, wrapped in a shawl. Beyond is a balcony, white with the snow that falls and swirls around the old lady. I stepped forward onto the icy-cold room and try a cough, a small, here I am, one. After a moment, Lady Kraken lifts one claw hand and beckons me over. The door behind me swings shut with a coffin lid thud. See how clean this town looks, says Lady Kraken as I reach her side. The snow covers all the grime, all the strangeness of this place. It makes everything seem new again. I make a small, polite noise. It's a step up from the cough, but not a big one. But it wasn't snowing last night, was it, Mr. Lemon? Last night there was a beautiful full moon. I could see, and she turns her wheelchair sharply, everything. I can explain, I blurt out. The claw hand is raised again as the lady points it to my face. You saw it, didn't you? Yes, face to face, saw the full horror of it. Her eyes are flashing. Saw with your own eyes the monstrosity that haunts our town. I step back, clutching my cap to my chest. Lady Kraken, your grandness, I was going to tell you, I promise. You did promise, didn't you, Mr. Lemon? Lady Kraken's chair whirs into electric life as she advances toward me. Promise to be my eyes and ears. So tell me now, why was the creature at the museum? Why were you there? I don't know, I managed to say, backing into a table. It's the very table Lady K uses to display the images with her camera Luna. That is to say, I do know, I just don't really know what it all means. Lady Kraken creaks to a halt right in front of me. Are you always such a dunderbrain, boy? She croaks. Surely this means that Dr. Thalassie is up to something. I manage a shrug. And how about that other one? Says Lady Kraken. The girl? Oh, yes, Herbert Lemon, I know about the girl. Something else you were going to tell me, I suppose? I grin, though the grin must look a bit desperate. The cap in my hand is crushed now, my knuckles white. So why haven't you reported back? Lady Kraken says. Something is stirring in this town. Plots are thickening. Threads are coming together. I am just a frail old lady with a camera Luna. I need you to help me, Herbert Lemon. I need you to help me before it's too late and someone else gets the egg. What? I say, blinking. You want the egg too? I wasn't expecting this. I bet they're in on it together, says Lady K, ignoring my question. Dr. Thalassie and the girl, working hand in glove, no doubt. A great conspiracy of scheming plot to take what's rightfully mine. The egg is rightfully yours, I say. I'm still blinking. Have you cloth for brains, boy? Lady Kraken croaks. Haven't you figured it out? Of course it's rightfully mine. It destroyed my grandfather. Then it destroyed my whole family as we fought to end the curse and put things right. It has taken everything I loved. Dear father, my brothers, my sister even, when she too tried her hand at claiming the monster's egg. I pause. She pauses for a gasp of breath, then continues. But if grandfather has returned, then there is hope again. Maybe finally we can regain the Malamander egg and I can use its power to wish my family back to life. That egg is rightfully mine. No one has paid a higher price for it than I. And with its power, I could end my grandfather's curse and set the Kraken family free. Your grandfather? I say, light slowly dawning in my poor rattled brain box. You mean... I gulp. You mean Boathook Man is your grandfather? Captain Kraken is my grandfather. The old lady narrows her eyes at me. This Boathook Man, as you call him, is merely a wisp that remains on Earth, growing thinner every year, destined to never die because he lost the egg. But with the power of the Malamander egg, I can make him a real man once again. He can be set free. But I can't help but saying aloud, looking at the wizened old woman in her antique electric wheelchair. How are you going to get the egg? Lady Kraken grins her turtle grin. I'm not, Mr. Lemon. You are going to get it for me. Okay, that is where we are stopping today with Malamander. I will have another episode out for you guys in a few days, but in the meantime, keep reading with your reading buddy and keep having fun this summer. I'll see you next week. Bye!